pregnant janitor drove her drunk boss home after the party. What he said the next morning. Maria's hand shook as she gripped the steering wheel of the Mercedes, her 6-month belly pressed against the seat, while the man who barely knew her name mumbled broken apologies in the passenger seat. But it was what he whispered at 2 a.m. that would change both their lives forever. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now tell me, how was our last story? Hope you enjoyed every bit and piece of it. If you did, drop a comment below. Once again, you're welcome to Mr. Paul's Stories, where we weave our dreams and hearts together through the magic of stories. Before we dive deeper into today's soul-stirring tale, please, give a minute, let me say a word of prayer with you today. May your heart brim with boundless love, may your spirit sparkle with hope and wonder, and may a cascade of blessings wrap you in warmth and peace. I pray this story binds us closer, lifts our souls, and fills us with the beauty of shared moments. Amen. Now, my precious friends, let's get cozy, let our cares melt away, and step hand in heart into this enchanting new story together. Now, let's begin today's story. Maria Esperanza Rodriguez adjusted her cleaning cart in the gleaming marble lobby of Meridian Financial Tower in downtown Seattle, the Space Needle's lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows 40 stories below. At 6 months pregnant, every push of the heavy cart sent a dull ache through her lower back, but she needed this job, needed the health insurance that would cover her baby's delivery in 3 months. The executive floors after midnight were her domain, a world of mahogany desks and leather chairs where million-dollar deals were decided by people who never noticed the woman who emptied their trash. She moved efficiently through the offices, her worn sneakers silent on plush carpeting, past family photos of skiing trips to Aspen and sailing adventures in the San Juan Islands. What would it feel like to belong in a world like this? She wondered, running her cloth over a desk that cost more than she made in 6 months. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible in a place where you worked every day? 8 floors up, James Harrison Blackwood III stood at his corner office window, loosening his Italian silk tie as he stared out at Elliott Bay. At 34, he was the youngest senior partner in Meridian's history, but tonight the achievement felt hollow. The company Christmas party had ended an hour ago, and he'd stayed behind, nursing his 3rd whiskey while reviewing quarterly reports that blurred together like his increasingly empty life. His phone buzzed with another text from his mother. The Wellington Foundation dinner is Thursday. Miranda Ashworth will be there. Time to settle down, James. He deleted it without responding. Every woman in his social circle was the same, perfectly polished, strategically positioned, emotionally vacant. They saw his portfolio, not his person. James had everything his family's money could buy, but sitting alone in his office at 1 a.m., he felt poorer than he'd ever been. Success had become his prison, and he was serving a life sentence of loneliness. Meanwhile, Maria finished the 38th floor and stepped into the elevator, her hand instinctively cradling her belly as the baby kicked. She whispered softly in Spanish, "Patience, mi amor. Mama's almost done." The elevator opened on the 40th floor, executive territory, where she rarely encountered anyone this late. But as she pushed her cart toward the corner office, she heard something that stopped her cold, the sound of quiet sobbing. Through the crack in James Blackwood's door, she saw him slumped over his desk, shoulders shaking. In her 28 years, Maria had learned to recognize the universal language of heartbreak, regardless of bank accounts or zip codes. She stood frozen, torn between professional invisibility and human compassion. The man who signed her tiny paychecks was falling apart, and she was the only witness to his vulnerability. That's when she noticed the empty bottle of Macallan 25 on his desk, and the car keys scattered beside it. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs as she knocked softly on the mahogany door. "Mr. Blackwood? Sir." The sobbing stopped abruptly. She heard papers shuffling, a chair scraping. We're closed. Building's closed." His voice was thick with alcohol and something deeper, a pain that money couldn't medicate. Maria had heard that same brokenness in her own voice 3 years ago when David walked out, leaving her with nothing but unpaid bills and a broken heart. "Sir, it's Maria. From cleaning services." She pushed the door open slightly, her pregnant belly leading the way. "I saw your keys, and the bottle." James looked up, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. His tie hung loose, his $100 haircut was mussed, and his eyes were red-rimmed. For a moment, he stared at her as if she were an apparition, this small Latina woman in a faded uniform, standing in his sanctuary of success. "You shouldn't. I'm fine." He tried to straighten his tie, but his hands shook. "Just working late." Maria stepped closer, noting the way he swayed slightly in his chair. In the dim light filtering through the Seattle skyline, she could see past the expensive suit to something she recognized, a man drowning in his own life. "Mr. Blackwood, you can't drive home like this." He laughed bitterly. "Home? You mean my empty penthouse overlooking the Sound? Where the only conversations I have are with Alexa." He gestured vaguely at the windows. "You know what's funny? I can see the whole city from up there, but I've never felt more invisible." The raw honesty in his voice caught Maria off guard. She'd spent 3 years cleaning around this man, knowing him only as signatures on memos and the back of his head during late-night meetings. She'd never heard him speak like this, without corporate polish, without the armor of authority. "Where do you live, sir?" "Queen Anne. The Metropolitan." He named one of Seattle's most exclusive addresses. "Why?" Maria made a decision that would change both their lives. "I'm driving you home." "What?" "No, I couldn't. You're..." His eyes dropped to her belly, then back to her face. "I don't even know your last name." "Rodriguez. Maria Rodriguez." She moved to his desk, gently taking his keys. "And you're James Harrison Blackwood III. You take your coffee black, you work 17-hour days, and you haven't taken a real lunch break in the 8 months I've been cleaning your office." He stared at her, stunned. "You notice that?" "I notice everything, Mr. Blackwood. Like how you leave $20 bills in your desk drawer that mysteriously disappear when your cleaning lady has a doctor's appointment she can't afford. Like how you never eat the expensive lunches your assistant orders, you just pick at them while you work." James felt something crack open in his chest. This woman, this pregnant woman whose paycheck he signed without thought, had seen him more clearly than anyone in his gold-plated life. "I can call you a car service," Maria continued softly, helping him to his feet. "But at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, you'll wait 40 minutes, and you shouldn't be alone right now." "Why?" The question escaped him like a prayer. "Why would you do this for me?" Maria paused at his office door, her hand resting on her belly where her baby kicked as if responding to the tension in the room. In the hallway's fluorescent light, her face looked tired but determined. "Because 3 months ago, when I was having contractions during my shift and thought I might lose my baby, you saw me doubled over in the break room. You didn't know my name then either, but you drove me to Swedish Medical Center yourself. You waited in that emergency room for 4 hours until the doctors said we were okay." James's mouth opened, but no words came. "You never mentioned it again. Never asked for credit or thanks. But I remember. And when someone shows you kindness when you need it most." She shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "You remember." The elevator ride down 40 floors passed in silence heavy with possibility. James stood in the corner, stealing glances at this woman who'd somehow seen through his carefully constructed walls. Maria watched the numbers descend, acutely aware that they were crossing more than just physical floors. They were crossing the invisible lines that separated their worlds. In the parking garage, Maria's beat-up Honda Civic sat next to James's gleaming Mercedes like a study in contrasts. She looked at his luxury car, then at her own vehicle with its cracked windshield and faded paint. "We'll take yours," she said simply. "You shouldn't leave it here overnight." As she adjusted the driver's seat and mirrors in the Mercedes, James sank into the passenger seat. The first time in years he'd been driven anywhere by someone who wasn't paid staff. The leather was cool against his fevered skin, and the familiar scent of his expensive cologne mixed with something new, the faint aroma of Maria's vanilla perfume and the unmistakable sweetness of impending motherhood. "Maria," he said quietly as she navigated out of the garage onto the empty Seattle streets. "Yes, sir." "Thank you." Two simple words, but the way he said them, raw, grateful, completely stripped of pretense, made Maria's chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. What moments of unexpected kindness have changed your perspective on someone? Share your story in the comments below. The alarm on James's nightstand shrieked at 6:30 a.m., cutting through his skull like a buzz saw. He rolled over in his king-sized bed, expensive Egyptian cotton sheets tangled around his legs, and immediately regretted existing. His mouth tasted like regret and top-shelf whiskey, and his head pounded with the rhythm of a jackhammer. Fragments of the previous night flickered through his consciousness like a broken film reel. The Christmas party, the empty office, the bottle, and then a woman's voice, gentle and accented. Soft hands helping him to his feet. The smell of vanilla and industrial soap. James sat up too quickly, the room spinning around him. His BMW keys were on the nightstand, but he distinctly remembered leaving them at the office. Someone had driven him home. Someone had seen him at his absolute worst. In the shower of his Belltown penthouse, overlooking the Pike Place Market, James scrubbed away the shame along with the alcohol sweats. It had to have been his driver, Marcus. That was the only logical explanation. He'd call the office, confirm that Marcus had been contacted, and pretend the entire humiliating episode never happened. But as hot water cascaded over his shoulders, another memory surfaced, a pregnant belly pressed against the steering wheel. A woman's voice singing softly in Spanish. The way she'd helped him up the stairs to his apartment, careful and patient, like he mattered. "Impossible," he muttered, stepping out of the shower. "The cleaning staff doesn't have access to executive parking." Across town in South Seattle, Maria sat at her kitchen table in the cramped apartment she shared with her cousin Rosa, staring at a cup of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline of driving a car worth more than she'd make in 5 years. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her anxiety. She pressed her palm against her belly and whispered, "It's okay, Mija. We just helped someone who needed help. Nothing wrong with that." But everything felt wrong. The way he'd looked at her in the parking garage, really looked at her, like she was a person instead of part of the furniture. The way he'd said thank you with tears in his eyes. The way her heart had done something dangerously close to fluttering when his fingers brushed hers taking back his keys. Rosa emerged from their shared bedroom, her nurse scrubs wrinkled from a double shift at Harborview Medical Center. "You're up early, Prima. Everything okay?" Maria forced a smile. "Just couldn't sleep. The baby's active today." Rosa studied her with the sharp eyes that made her an excellent trauma nurse. "This is about work, isn't it? Did something happen with that cleaning company? Because if anyone's giving you trouble." No, nothing like that." Maria stood, dumping her untouched tea in the sink. "I should get ready. Day shift starts at 8. But as she headed toward the bathroom, Rosa's voice stopped her. "Maria, you know you can't save everyone, right? Especially not people who live in a completely different world." The words hit too close to home. Maria had always been the one who brought home stray cats, who gave her last dollar to the homeless veteran at the bus stop, who worked double shifts when coworkers called in sick. Her compassion was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, closing the bathroom door. At Meridian Financial, James arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, his Armani suit pressed to perfection, his game face firmly in place. But as he stepped off the elevator on the 40th floor, the smell of industrial disinfectant made his stomach clench with something that wasn't just hangover nausea. His assistant, Patricia, looked up from her computer with barely concealed surprise. "You're early, Mr. Blackwood. And you look, well, considering how you left the party last night." "I need you to call the car service," James interrupted, not meeting her eyes. "Find out which driver brought me home. I need to express my appreciation." Patricia's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Sir, I didn't arrange for a driver last night. After you left the party, I assumed you were driving yourself, but then this morning your BMW was in the executive garage." The words hit James like ice water. If the car service didn't bring him home, then who did? His mind raced through possibilities, each one more unlikely than the last, until it landed on the most impossible option of all. The cleaning lady. "Get me the employment records for the night cleaning staff," he said quietly. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "The cleaning staff, sir." "Just do it." James retreated into his office, closing the door harder than necessary. He spent the next hour reviewing quarterly projections, but the numbers blurred together. Every time he looked up from his computer, he saw that corner of the office where he'd broken down, where soft hands had helped him stand, where a stranger's kindness had been the only light in his darkness. What do you think drives someone to help a person who's never even acknowledged their existence? Share your thoughts in the comments. By 10 a.m., Patricia had delivered a thin folder containing the minimal information Meridian kept on their contracted cleaning staff. James flipped through the pages until he found her, Maria E. Rodriguez, age 28, employed by Sparkle Clean Services for 2 years. Emergency contact, Rosa Rodriguez, cousin. Address, South Seattle. The black and white photocopy of her employee ID showed a serious young woman with kind eyes and a guarded expression. She looked nothing like the women in his social circle, no professional glamour shots or strategically tousled hair. Just honest exhaustion and quiet dignity. James stared at the photo for a long time, his conscience and his pride wrestling in the arena of his chest. She'd seen him at his absolute lowest. She knew that beneath the expensive suits and corner office, he was just another broken person stumbling through life. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to pretend it never happened. Send a generic thank you gift through HR and maintain the comfortable distance between their worlds. But as he sat in his climate-controlled office, surrounded by the trappings of success that felt increasingly like shackles, James couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd sung softly in Spanish while driving him home, like he was someone worth caring about. And that terrified him more than any corporate merger ever could. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her anxiety. She pressed her palm against her belly and whispered, "It's okay, Mija. We just helped someone who needed help. Nothing wrong with that." But everything felt wrong. The way he'd looked at her in the parking garage, really looked at her, like she was a person instead of part of the furniture. The way he'd said thank you with tears in his eyes. The way her heart had done something dangerously close to fluttering when his fingers brushed hers taking back his keys. Rosa emerged from their shared bedroom, her nurse scrubs wrinkled from a double shift at Harborview Medical Center. "You're up early, Prima. Everything okay?" Maria forced a smile. "Just couldn't sleep. The baby's active today." Rosa studied her with the sharp eyes that made her an excellent trauma nurse. "This is about work, isn't it? Did something happen with that cleaning company? Because if anyone's giving you trouble." No, nothing like that." Maria stood, dumping her untouched tea in the sink. "I should get ready. Day shift starts at 8. But as she headed toward the bathroom, Rosa's voice stopped her. "Maria, you know you can't save everyone, right? Especially not people who live in a completely different world." The words hit too close to home. Maria had always been the one who brought home stray cats, who gave her last dollar to the homeless veteran at the bus stop, who worked double shifts when coworkers called in sick. Her compassion was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, closing the bathroom door. At Meridian Financial, James arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, his Armani suit pressed to perfection, his game face firmly in place. But as he stepped off the elevator on the 40th floor, the smell of industrial disinfectant made his stomach clench with something that wasn't just hangover nausea. His assistant, Patricia, looked up from her computer with barely concealed surprise. "You're early, Mr. Blackwood. And you look, well, considering how you left the party last night." "I need you to call the car service," James interrupted, not meeting her eyes. "Find out which driver brought me home. I need to express my appreciation." Patricia's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Sir, I didn't arrange for a driver last night. After you left the party, I assumed you were driving yourself, but then this morning your BMW was in the executive garage." The words hit James like ice water. If the car service didn't bring him home, then who did? His mind raced through possibilities, each one more unlikely than the last, until it landed on the most impossible option of all. The cleaning lady. "Get me the employment records for the night cleaning staff," he said quietly. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "The cleaning staff, sir." "Just do it." James retreated into his office, closing the door harder than necessary. He spent the next hour reviewing quarterly projections, but the numbers blurred together. Every time he looked up from his computer, he saw that corner of the office where he'd broken down, where soft hands had helped him stand, where a stranger's kindness had been the only light in his darkness. What do you think drives someone to help a person who's never even acknowledged their existence? Share your thoughts in the comments. By 10 a.m., Patricia had delivered a thin folder containing the minimal information Meridian kept on their contracted cleaning staff. James flipped through the pages until he found her, Maria E. Rodriguez, age 28, employed by Sparkle Clean Services for 2 years. Emergency contact, Rosa Rodriguez, cousin. Address, South Seattle. The black and white photocopy of her employee ID showed a serious young woman with kind eyes and a guarded expression. She looked nothing like the women in his social circle, no professional glamour shots or strategically tousled hair. Just honest exhaustion and quiet dignity. James stared at the photo for a long time, his conscience and his pride wrestling in the arena of his chest. She'd seen him at his absolute lowest. She knew that beneath the expensive suits and corner office, he was just another broken person stumbling through life. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to pretend it never happened. Send a generic thank you gift through HR and maintain the comfortable distance between their worlds. But as noon approached, his resolve began cracking like ice under spring rain. Every executive who walked past his office made him think of how she'd helped him walk to his car. Every business lunch invitation reminded him of her gentle voice asking if he needed water. Every power play in the boardroom felt hollow compared to the simple humanity she'd shown him. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Don't forget, dinner tonight with the Ashworths. Miranda is very excited to see you again." James looked at the message, then at Maria's employee photo, then at the Seattle skyline stretching toward the working-class neighborhoods where real people lived real lives. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning the path that had been laid out for him since birth. At 12:47 p.m., he made a decision that would have horrified his father and scandalized his social circle. He loosened his tie, walked out of his corner office, and took the elevator down to the building's service level, where Sparkle Clean kept their supply closets and employee break room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he stood in the concrete hallway, his Italian leather shoes clicking against linoleum floors. He'd never been below the lobby level in his own building. Down here, the walls were painted institutional beige, and the air smelled of cleaning supplies and honest work. He was about to knock on the break room door when he heard her voice through the thin walls, speaking rapid Spanish to someone on the phone. Even through his limited understanding of the language, he could hear the worry in her tone, the exhaustion that came from carrying too much weight on shoulders too small. James pressed his palm against the cool concrete wall and closed his eyes. What was he doing? What did he think would happen if he walked through that door? That somehow a pregnant janitor and a trust fund executive could bridge the Grand Canyon of their different worlds? His phone buzzed again. This time it was his business partner, Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. We need your projections on the Portland expansion. Reality crashed back like cold Pacific waves. He had responsibilities, obligations, a life that existed in boardrooms and country clubs. Whatever had happened last night was an anomaly, a moment of weakness that he needed to forget and move past. James straightened his tie, turned around, and walked back toward the elevator. But as the doors closed and carried him back up to his gilded cage, he couldn't shake the memory of her voice singing softly in Spanish, or the way she'd made him feel less alone in his darkest hour. Behind him, Maria hung up her phone and wiped tears from her eyes. The doctor's office had just called. Her baby needed additional tests, expensive tests that her insurance might not cover. She looked at her swollen feet in their worn sneakers and wondered how she was going to make it through another shift, let alone another 3 months of pregnancy. She had no idea that 40 floors above her, a man in a $1,000 suit was trying desperately to convince himself that forgetting her was the right thing to do. And failing miserably. The Pike Place market bustled around them as James led Maria through the maze of vendors, her hand tucked protectively around her belly as they navigated the Saturday morning crowd. He'd insisted on buying her breakfast after she'd mentioned craving fresh strawberries, something about the baby needing vitamin C. "You don't have to do this," Maria said for the third time as James selected the ripest berries from a vendor's display. "I can afford my own fruit." "I know you can," he replied, handing the vendor a 20. "But I want to. Is that okay?" The simple question, "Is that okay?" caught her off guard. In her world, men took what they wanted. They didn't ask permission for kindness. They found a bench overlooking Elliott Bay, the morning sun painting golden streaks across the water. James watched Maria bite into a strawberry, her eyes closing in pure contentment, and felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time he'd seen someone find such joy in something so simple? "Tell me about him," James said quietly. Maria's hand stilled on her belly. "Who?" "The father. You never mention him." The question she'd been dreading. Maria set down the container of strawberries, her appetite suddenly gone. "There's nothing to tell." "Maria." James turned to face her fully. "I've told you things I've never told anyone. About my father, about feeling trapped in a life that isn't mine. Can't you trust me with this?" She looked out at the water, watching a ferry disappear behind Vashon Island. "His name was Diego. We were together 3 years. I thought." She swallowed hard. "I thought he loved me." James waited, sensing there was more. "When I told him about the baby, he said I was trying to trap him. That I got pregnant on purpose to force him to marry me." Her voice cracked. "He left that night. Haven't seen him since." "Jesus, Maria. I'm sorry. You know what the worst part is?" She turned to him, tears threatening. For a moment, I believed him. I actually wondered if maybe subconsciously, I had wanted this to happen. That maybe I was just another desperate woman trying to hold onto a man who didn't want her. James felt a familiar rage building, not unlike what he'd felt watching his father dismiss his mother's feelings for decades. "You know that's not true." "Do I?" She laughed bitterly. "I'm 28, pregnant, and alone, cleaning offices for $12 an hour. Maybe Diego was right. Maybe I was just." "Stop." James's voice was sharp enough to cut through her self-doubt. "Don't you dare let his weakness define your worth." Maria looked at him, startled by the intensity in his voice. "You want to know why I was drunk that night?" James ran his hands through his hair. "Because I'd just come from dinner with someone my mother set me up with. Miranda Ashworth, old family friend, trust fund, all the right connections. And the whole time she talked about our potential future together, all I could think about was how empty it felt. How much I envied people who felt real emotion." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then I met you. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to care about someone without conditions. Without contracts or social benefits or family approval. What do you think draws people from different worlds together? Share your thoughts below. James. Maria whispered. I've been thinking about that night in the car. About what I said to you. He looked directly at her. I meant every word. The memory flooded back, his whispered confession as she'd helped him to his door. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever met, and I don't even know your last name. You were drunk, she said softly. I was honest. For maybe the first time in my adult life. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. I got you something. James, no. I can't accept. It's not expensive, he said quickly. Just open it. Inside was a simple silver chain with a small heart pendant. Nothing elaborate, nothing that screamed money. Just beautiful in its simplicity. I saw it at a little shop in Pioneer Square, James explained. The woman there told me it was made by a local artist. I thought it was something you might actually want to wear. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Maria's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever chosen something for her so thoughtfully. Diego had given her expensive gifts, jewelry that felt like apologies, flowers that felt like obligations. This felt like love. There's something else, James said, his voice dropping. About my father. About why I understand what it's like to feel invisible. Maria wiped her eyes, sensing this was important. He built Meridian from nothing. Worked 18-hour days, missed every birthday, every Christmas morning, every moment that mattered. And my mother, she waited. She always waited for him to notice her, to choose her over the business. James's jaw tightened. She died waiting. Cancer, 3 years ago. And you know what he said at her funeral? That she would have wanted him to get back to work. That grief was just another obstacle to overcome. Oh, James. I swore I'd never be like him. But look at me, 34 alone, married to a company that doesn't love me back. He turned to her. Until I met you. Until you showed me what it means to actually care about someone else's happiness more than your own. Maria reached out and took his hand. You're nothing like him. How can you be sure? Because he never would have driven his cleaning lady home. He never would have noticed she was pregnant. And he definitely never would have bought her strawberries just to see her smile. James lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles gently. I'm falling in love with you, Maria. I know it's crazy, I know it's complicated, but I needed you to know. The words hung between them like a bridge they could either cross or burn. The Pike Place market buzzed with Saturday morning energy as James nervously checked his watch outside Victrola Coffee Roasters on Capitol Hill. He'd chosen this neighborhood cafe specifically, far from his usual haunts in Bellevue, where every barista knew his usual order and every patron might recognize the Blackwood name. Maria appeared around the corner, her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual work ponytail. In jeans and a soft lavender maternity sweater, she looked younger, more radiant. The morning Seattle drizzle had stopped, and unexpected December sunshine filtered through the coffee shop's large windows. I wasn't sure you'd come, James admitted as he held the door open for her. Neither was I, Maria replied honestly, her hand unconsciously smoothing over her belly. But curiosity won. They found a quiet corner table, the awkwardness palpable as James fidgeted with his coffee cup, a simple black coffee instead of his usual elaborate espresso drink. Maria cradled a decaf latte, studying his face in the natural light. Without the harsh fluorescence of the office, she could see the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the vulnerability he worked so hard to hide. I've been thinking about what you said, James began quietly. About not knowing who I really am. Maria raised an eyebrow. And you were right. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm 34 years old, and I can tell you everything about market projections and nothing about what makes me happy. I know the wine list at every 5-star restaurant in Seattle, but I haven't cooked a meal for myself since college. So what would make you happy? Maria asked, surprising herself with how genuinely she wanted to know. James stared out the window at a street musician playing guitar. A small crowd gathered around him. I used to paint, he said suddenly. Watercolors. My grandmother taught me when I was 8, during summers at her cabin on Whidbey Island. She'd set up easels on the beach, and we'd paint the sunset until the mosquitoes drove us inside. Maria smiled. What happened to that little boy? Prep school. Harvard. The family business. James's voice grew distant. My father said art was a hobby, not a career. By the time I realized I'd lost myself completely, I didn't know how to find my way back. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in Maria's chest. Show me your hands, she said impulsively. What? Your hands. Show me. Confused, James placed his hands palm up on the small table. Maria reached across and gently traced a small scar on his right thumb. Paintbrush cut. James stared at her finger on his skin, the simple touch sending electricity through him. How did you? I have the same scar. Art class, sophomore year of high school. Sister Catherine was teaching us perspective drawing. Maria's eyes grew soft with memory. I wanted to be an art teacher once. Before life got complicated. What happened? James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Roberto happened. My ex-fiancé. He said art was impractical, that I needed to think about providing for our family. So I dropped out, got certified in office management. By the time I realized he was never going to marry me, that he already had a wife in El Salvador, I was 6 months pregnant and cleaning offices to survive. James felt anger rise in his chest at this unknown man who had stolen Maria's dreams. That's not right. No, Maria agreed, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. But it is life. We all make choices. Some we regret, some we learn from. Don't you ever want to paint again? James asked. Maria smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes completely. Actually, I've been sketching the baby's room. Nothing fancy, just happy things. Clouds and butterflies. Things that might make her smile. Her. James felt his heart skip at the pronoun. Isabella Rose, Maria said softly. Isabella for strength, Rose for beauty. I want her to know she can be both. The name hung between them like a bridge. James realized he was holding his breath, afraid to disturb this moment of perfect honesty. Can I tell you something crazy? James asked suddenly. Crazier than this whole situation? Maria gestured between them with a small laugh. I've thought about you every day since Thursday night. Not just about what you did for me, but the way you looked at me. Like you saw something worth saving. Maria's cheeks flushed pink. James. I know this is insane, he continued, his words tumbling out faster. I know we're from different worlds. But when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be real. To be seen for who I am underneath all the expectations and obligations. Maria was quiet for a long moment, watching a young couple at the next table share a muffin, their fingers intertwined on the wooden surface. My grandmother used to say that love finds us when we least expect it and most need it. Is that what this is? James asked, his voice barely audible. Love. Maria met his eyes directly. I think it might be the beginning of it. James reached across the table, his fingers barely brushing hers. The touch was electric, full of possibility and terrifying in its intensity. What happens now? He whispered. Before Maria could answer, her phone buzzed with a text. Her face immediately changed as she read it. the color draining from her cheeks. "What is it?" James asked, alarm in his voice. Maria's hand trembled as she set the phone down. "My landlord. I have 3 days to catch up on rent, or I'm evicted." The magical bubble around them burst, reality crashing back in with devastating force. What would you do if you found unexpected love, but faced losing everything? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes the heart wants what seems impossible. The Meridian Financial Boardroom had never felt more like a coliseum than it did that Thursday morning. Maria sat in the leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, her hands folded protectively over her 7-month belly, while 20 pairs of eyes dissected her like a specimen under a microscope. James's mother, Victoria Blackwood, commanded the head of the table like a general preparing for war. Her Chanel suit was armor, her pearl necklace a weapon of social superiority. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, her Boston Brahmin accent cutting through the air like ice. "You've been entertaining the cleaning staff?" "Her name is Maria," James said quietly, his jaw clenched. "And she's not staff anymore. She's what, exactly?" His father, Harrison Blackwood Jr., interrupted from his position near the windows overlooking Pike Place Market. "Your girlfriend? Your charity project? Your midlife crisis?" Maria felt each word like a physical blow. This was the world James came from, a world where love was transaction, where worth was measured in stock portfolios and country club memberships. She'd been naive to think she could fit into this gleaming tower of privilege. "She's the woman I'm in love with," James said, standing up so abruptly his chair rolled backward. "The woman who's carrying my child." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's manicured fingers drummed against the mahogany table. "James, darling, you're 34 years old. Surely you understand the implications of this situation." "What implications?" But even as James asked the question, Maria could see in his eyes that he knew. He'd always known. His uncle Richard, the firm's founding partner, leaned forward with predatory precision. "The Wellington Foundation contract alone is worth $40 million annually. They've made it quite clear that family values and social standing matter to them. A lot." "Are you threatening me?" "We're protecting you," Victoria said smoothly. "And protecting this family's legacy. Your great-grandfather built this firm from nothing. Your father expanded it across the Pacific Northwest. Are you really willing to throw that away for?" She gestured vaguely in Maria's direction without looking at her. Maria stood up slowly, her pregnancy making the movement awkward. Every eye in the room followed her, and she felt their judgment like acid on her skin. "I should go." "Maria, no." James reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Your mother is right," Maria said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I don't belong here. I never did." "That's not true. Isn't it?" She looked around the room at the portraits of Blackwood patriarchs, at the awards and accolades, at the world that had shaped the man she loved. "Look at me, James. Really look. I'm a high school dropout from Yakima who cleans offices for a living. I live in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill and take the bus to work. What do we actually have in common besides one night when you were drunk and vulnerable?" The words hung in the air like poison gas. Maria saw something die in James's eyes, hope maybe, or the last vestige of the fairy tale they'd been living. "You have everything in common that matters," James said desperately. "You're kind, you're strong, you see me for who I really am." "Who you really are is Harrison Blackwood's son," his father interrupted coldly. "The heir to a financial empire. You have responsibilities, James. To this family, to this firm, to your position in society." Victoria pulled out a leather portfolio and slid it across the table toward Maria. "Miss Rodriguez, I think you'll find this quite generous. Enough to relocate somewhere comfortable, perhaps Portland or San Francisco. Enough to raise your child without financial concerns. All we ask in return is your discretion." Maria stared at the contract without touching it. The number on the check visible through the clear pocket made her dizzy. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to give her baby everything she'd never had. Enough to disappear from James's world forever. Mama always said that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is, Maria whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. James stepped closer. Maria, you don't have to. Yes, she does, Victoria said firmly. Because if she doesn't take this generous offer now, I'll make sure she never works in Seattle again. I'll make sure her name becomes synonymous with scandal in every respectable circle. I'll make sure her child grows up knowing exactly what kind of woman his mother really is. The threat landed like a physical blow. Maria's hand flew to her belly, protecting her unborn child from words that felt like weapons. You can't threaten her, James said, his voice dangerous. I'm not threatening anyone, Victoria replied smoothly. I'm simply explaining consequences. Actions have consequences, James. Surely Harvard Business School taught you that. Maria looked at James, really looked at him, and saw the conflict tearing him apart. Love warring with loyalty, heart fighting against heritage. But she also saw something else, the comfortable assumption that he could have both. That somehow, someway, his money and influence would make this work out. I was wrong about you, Maria said softly, and James flinched as if she'd slapped him. Maria. I thought you were different because you cried in your office that night. Because you held me like I mattered. Because you whispered my name like it was a prayer. Her voice broke. But you're just like everyone else in this room. You think money fixes everything. You think love is something you can manage and control and fit into your perfect little world. That's not fair. Isn't it? Maria's tears finally fell, hot and bitter. When your family threatened me, what did you do? Did you tell them to go to hell? Did you choose me over their $40 million contract? She shook her head. You stood there and tried to negotiate. Even now, you're trying to figure out how to have your cake and eat it too. The truth of her words settled over the room like a funeral shroud. James opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. Maria picked up her purse, a worn canvas bag that looked pathetic in this temple of wealth, and walked toward the door. Each step felt like she was leaving pieces of her heart on the marble floor. The baby, James called out desperately. She paused at the door without turning around. The baby will be fine. We'll be fine. We were fine before you, and we'll be fine after you. I love you, he whispered. Maria's hand rested on the door handle for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. If you loved me, you would have chosen me. The door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in the silence she left behind. In the elevator descending 40 floors, Maria pressed her back against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor, her belly between her knees, sobbing for the dream that had died in a boardroom overlooking Elliott Bay. She'd driven him home that night because she'd seen his humanity. But in that boardroom, surrounded by his family's legacy, she'd seen his limitations. Sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gap between two worlds. What would you have done in Maria's position? Taken the money or walked away with nothing? Share your thoughts below. Outside the Meridian building, Seattle's winter rain began to fall, washing the city clean while Maria Rodriguez walked away from the only man she'd ever loved, carrying his child and her shattered heart into an uncertain future. The rain hammered against James's penthouse windows in Capitol Hill, each drop echoing the hollow ache in his chest. 3 days had passed since the disaster at Pike Place Market, 3 days since he'd watched Maria walk away with tears streaming down her face. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten anything substantial, hadn't been able to focus on a single contract or meeting. His phone buzzed incessantly, his mother demanding explanations about the spectacle at the market, board members expressing concern about his erratic behavior, and Miranda Ashworth's passive-aggressive texts about their postponed engagement announcement. He ignored them all. Instead, James sat in his leather chair, staring at the business card Maria had dropped in her haste to escape, Dr. Elena Vasquez, OB/GYN, Seattle Children's Hospital. He'd called the office twice, hanging up before anyone answered. What could he possibly say? That he was the privileged bastard who'd broken the heart of one of their patients? His hands shook as he poured another whiskey, the amber liquid catching the city lights below. For 34 years, he'd lived according to his family's blueprint: the right schools, the right career, the right social circle. But sitting in this marble mausoleum, he realized he'd built a life that felt like death. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He was in love with Maria Rodriguez. Not infatuated, not guilty, genuinely, desperately, completely in love. He loved her quiet strength, her gentle wisdom, the way she hummed Spanish lullabies to her unborn baby. He loved how she saw through his wealth to the broken man underneath, how she'd offered him compassion when he deserved contempt. And he'd thrown it all away to preserve appearances that meant nothing to him. James stood abruptly, his chair spinning behind him. He grabbed his coat and keys, his heart pounding with something that felt dangerously like hope. If Maria wouldn't see him, maybe her doctor would listen. Maybe there was still a chance to make this right. Meanwhile, in her small apartment in Georgetown, Maria sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills and job applications. Her landlord had called twice about next month's rent, and her savings account showed a balance that made her stomach clench with fear. She'd been fired from Meridian Financial, officially for violation of professional boundaries, but she knew the real reason. Mrs. Blackwood's influence reached every corner of Seattle's corporate world, and Maria's name was now toxic. No cleaning service would hire her, no office building would accept her application. Her friend Rosa sat across from her, sorting through the rejection letters. "Mija, maybe you should consider his offer. The money could." "No." Maria's voice was firm despite the tears threatening to fall. "I won't be his charity case. I won't let my baby grow up thinking love can be bought." But late at night, when the baby kicked and she worried about prenatal vitamins she couldn't afford, doubt crept in. Was her pride worth her child's future? Was she being noble or just foolish? Her phone rang, and Dr. Vasquez's name appeared on the screen. Maria's heart lurched. Was something wrong with the baby? "Maria, I know this is unusual, but there's someone here who needs to speak with you. He says it's urgent, about the baby's future." "I don't want to see him, doctor. Please." "This isn't about him, Querida. This is about choices, yours and his. Sometimes we have to hear someone out to know our own hearts." Maria closed her eyes, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. "Put him on." The silence stretched between them, filled with 3 days of pain and longing. Finally, James's voice came through, rough with emotion. "Maria, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I hurt you, betrayed your trust, let you down when you needed someone to believe in you." She said nothing, but her grip tightened on the phone. "I've been sitting here thinking about what kind of man I want to be, what kind of father I could be, if you'd let me. Not because of obligation or guilt, but because I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your incredible heart. I love how you make me want to be better than everything I was raised to be." Maria's breath caught. "James, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let me prove that love is stronger than the walls we build around ourselves. Let me show you that a man can change, that money doesn't matter when your heart is at stake." Through her tears, Maria whispered, "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I choose you, Maria. I choose us. I choose love over luxury, heart over hierarchy. I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to build a life where our child grows up knowing that real wealth is measured in laughter, not bank accounts." The silence stretched again, but this time it hummed with possibility. "One chance," Maria whispered. "One real chance to prove that James Blackwood the man is different from James Blackwood the heir." "That's all I need," he breathed. "That's all I'll ever need." 3 months later, The first cherry blossoms were blooming along the waterfront in Pike Place Market when Maria felt the first contraction. She was arranging fresh tulips at the flower stand James had helped her lease. Their quiet partnership had grown into something beautiful, like the spring flowers she now sold to tourists and locals alike. "James," she whispered into her phone, gripping the counter as another wave hit. "It's time." He was there in 12 minutes, abandoning a board meeting mid-sentence. As he helped her into the car, not the Mercedes this time, but the reliable Honda Accord they'd chosen together, she saw his hands trembling just as hers had that night 8 months ago. "Breathe, mi amor," she said softly, using the endearment that had slipped out during one of their coffee shop conversations. "You're more nervous than I am." At Northwest Hospital, James paced the waiting room like a caged panther. His mother had called 6 times. He'd ignored them all. His father had threatened to cut him off financially when news of his relationship with the help had leaked to Seattle society. James had responded by liquidating his trust fund to start their flower business together. "Mr. Blackwood." The nurse appeared with a smile. "She's asking for you." In the delivery room, Maria gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Stay with me," she whispered between contractions. "Don't let me do this alone." "Never," he promised, pressing his lips to her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere, Maria." When baby Isabella Rosa entered the world at 3:42 a.m., almost exactly 8 months after that fateful night, James wept openly. The nurse placed the tiny perfect child in Maria's arms, and she looked up at him with exhausted joy. "She has your eyes," Maria whispered. "She has your strength," James replied, touching the baby's tiny fist with wonder. 6 weeks later, James knelt in the same Pike Place Market flower stand where their new life had begun. The ring had belonged to his grandmother, the only member of his family who had loved him unconditionally. It seemed fitting that it should go to the woman who had taught him what unconditional love truly meant. "Maria Esperanza Rodriguez," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "you drove me home when I was lost in more ways than one. You showed me that love isn't about what you can afford, it's about what you're willing to sacrifice. Will you marry me?" Through tears, she whispered, "Sí, mi amor." "Yes." The small crowd of market vendors erupted in applause. Old Giuseppe from the cheese stand wiped his eyes. Even the grumpy fishmonger at Pike Place Fish was smiling. As James slipped the ring onto her finger, Maria remembered that night in his office. How broken they'd both been, how impossible this moment would have seemed. But love, she'd learned, wasn't about possibility. It was about faith. "What did you say to me that night?" she asked, cradling Isabella while James held them both. "In the car, when you were drunk and scared." James smiled, remembering. "I said, I wish someone would see me for who I really am, not what I have." "And what did I say back?" "You said, maybe you haven't been looking in the right places, senor. The heart sees what the eyes miss." They kissed as the afternoon sun painted Elliott Bay gold, while their daughter slept peacefully between them. Around them, the market bustled with life. Tourists taking photos, vendors calling out their wares, the eternal dance of humanity in all its messy, beautiful glory. Before we end our story, we want to hear from you. What moment in your life taught you that love appears when you least expect it? Share your story in the comments below. James had lost his family's money but gained something infinitely more valuable. Maria had started that night as a pregnant janitor struggling to survive, but she'd found her soulmate in the most unlikely place imaginable. They'd learned that class and status were just illusions. What mattered was the courage to be vulnerable, the wisdom to see beyond surfaces, and the faith that love could bridge any divide. As they walked hand in hand through the market, James pushing the stroller while Maria waved to her fellow vendors, they passed the cleaning supply store where she used to buy industrial bleach and paper towels. Now it was just another shop in a neighborhood that had become home. The Mercedes was long gone, sold to fund their new life. But as they climbed into their Honda, James realized he'd never felt richer. He had everything he'd been searching for in boardrooms and country clubs. He just hadn't known to look for it in the quiet courage of a woman who'd drive a stranger home at 2 a.m., no questions asked. Where to, Mrs. Blackwood Rodriguez? James asked, starting the car. Home, Maria smiled, adjusting Isabella's blanket. We're going home. As they drove through the streets of Seattle, the Space Needle gleaming ahead of them like a beacon, they carried with them the truth that had transformed their lives. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and the most unlikely people can become your entire world. Love, after all, always finds a way.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will surely enjoy the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can never imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.